Hello, and you're listening to Your Majesty's Secret Podcast. I like my podcast shaken, not stirred. Only on the Four-Eyed Radio Network. If you'd like to check out more shows, go to foureyedradio.com.
Bond. James Bond. Shaken, not stirred.
Utter one more syllable and I'll have you killed.
I thought Christmas only comes once a year.
For your eyes only, darling.
I never joke about my word 007.
For England, James?
Come in, Univex. James Bond here.
Am I going to have a problem with you, Bond?
Allow me to introduce myself.
You're that secret agent! That English secret agent from England!
No, you're cleverer than you look.
Still better than looking cleverer than you are.
My God, what's Bond doing?
I think he's attempting re-entry, sir.
007 reporting for duty.
Hello, the name's Berkeley, Ziggy Berkeley from Cinema on the Rocks. And with me is Eric Dewey from Socially Awkward Studios. And you are listening to Her Majesty's Secret Podcast, only on the Four-Eyed Radio Network. That's right, this is the show where we talk about bondage, James Bondage, or at least men who have been in bondage.
That's right. Get ready for a very piercing episode today, guys. We're going in depth.
Oh yeah, bondage, piercing, and no, we're not talking about Prince Albert.
Ew.
Thankfully.
Ew.
No, we've done this a couple of times with Mr. Sean Connery, so we thought we'd branch out a little bit and discuss 4 of the films of Pierce Brosnan. Specifically, we'll be discussing films that he started taking on after he had already been in the role of 007 for a while. So we will be discussing The Tailor of Panama from 2001, The Ghost Writer from 2010, The November Man from last year, 2014, and his most recent picture from just a few months ago, Survivor.
That just came out a few months ago?
Yeah.
All right.
It came out simultaneously on video on demand and a very limited theatrical release, which was mostly not the United States.
That makes sense, but we'll get there.
Yeah, but just by happenstance, on the day we're recording this, it turns out that Mr. Brosnan is in the news.
Uh-oh.
Turns out that everybody's favorite people, the American TSA, stopped Pierce Brosnan at an airport in Burlington, Vermont. It turns out he tried to bring a knife through the airport.
Oh, bad spy. You should know how to hide that better than that by now.
Apparently, he was not carrying Q's good old-fashioned briefcase, even though Connery had one as far back as the 1960s in From Russia with Love. So, yes, he got caught carrying a knife through the airport. He just said, oops, I'm sorry, left the knife, went on his way. No police were called. In fact, half the TSA didn't even know what happened. But, hey.
Somebody did, and of course it made a news story. That actually happens, many times every day. Somebody comes through with a pocket. It's usually like a pocket knife or something like that, and that people don't even realize. I've been to the airport and seen, they've got bins that are essentially full of small pocket knives, even just the tiny little, like the mini Swiss Army ones, the ones that only have like 2 blades and the toothpick, and they go on your keychain. Like those, like just those things. And it's really a matter of how much is your time that it would take you to leave the line, go take that out to your car, assuming you parked, or what, or just, okay, you know what, never mind, forget it, it's gone now. And that's what most people decide. And somebody, if you're a knife collector, man, go get a job at the TSA. Just get them for free all day long.
Now, they're not supposed to do that. They get arrested for those sorts of things.
Oh, that's right. But at least they've saved us from all those terrorist attacks. We keep hearing about on the news how the TSA is saving us from all... Wait, what's that? They haven't? Not even one? Oh, well, never mind. What the hell are they there for?
And we're going to come completely full circle to that comment toward the end of the show. I'm just saying. But
the security theater of the TSA just bugs me sometimes. It's insane to me how many hoops we jump through when really the only thing that was done post 9/11 that actually prevented that from happening again was putting a lock on the damn cockpit door. Once they did that, you know what? That was never going to happen again. End of story.
And realistically, even I remember when I was flying back from Phoenix after Comic-Con, as I'm in the airport, they're playing the news story about how they leaked the report about the TSA where 95% of all the stuff that people tried to get through actually got through anyway.
Yeah.
But none of this stuff could actually cause a plane to come down. I mean, even the infamous shoe and underwear bombs, yes, they would have put a small hole in something, but they would not have actually brought down a plane. So it's the risk-reward thing. It's a perception thing. I mean, to some extent, I get it. To other extents, I think they've carried it way, way too far. I mean, I remember traveling internationally pre 9/11. In fact, I remember moving some of my stuff to Canada in my suitcase, and there were so many electronics and wires in there that no, I would never pack like that now. Are you kidding?
Oh, I mean, it's a sure way to get your stuff dug through. That's for sure. Even checked baggage, if they feel like it, they open it up and take a peek, and they're not nice about it either.
It's nerve-wracking enough carrying through a laptop, an iPad, and an e-reader. I mean, it's just... But, I mean, fortunately, I've been good so far. But, yeah. If you want to really understand the difference in air traffic theater, little bit tangential here, watch the movie Airport from 1970, which is, in fact, about someone who brings a bomb on a plane. Specifically, look at the security, which does not exist at all, period. Everybody walks straight through the airport, goes up to the gate. Doesn't matter if they're flying or not.
Yep.
They don't have to go through metal detectors. They don't get searched. Someone brings a gun. Someone brings a bomb. It's just, this is how travel used to be. And this is not actually all that long ago, folks. So, the world has changed.
Yep.
I remember when you would never see someone with a machine gun strolling around an American airport. I remember the first time I flew internationally between Canada and the US after 9/11, it felt like I was flying to the Middle East. I mean, it just was weird, wrong. It's toned down a little since then, but still,
right.
Strange experience.
Yep. But I think the next flight we should take is one straight to Panama. What do you say?
I think we should. Dun, 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 dun. Sorry. Does anyone not think of Van Halen, even just for a little bit? Come on, man. It's Panama.
It is
Van
Panama.
Halen, not Van Hagar.
All right, Joe Dirt.
Dude, that was low.
It's the only other time I've heard that phrase.
I thought I heard Dana Carvey say it on Wayne's World once. I might be wrong.
It's very possible. It's that whole SNL crowd, so it's very possible that he was taking it. He was lifting it.
That said, I do like Mas Tequila. But anyway, yes, The Tailor of Panama from 2001. This is based on the novel by John le Carré, who has written, of course, many novels of intrigue and espionage. In fact, 11 years before this, I think it was 11 years, Sean Connery appeared in The Russia House, which he also based on one of his novels. Though The Tailor of Panama is the only one of the filmed adaptations of a Le Carré novel that Le Carré himself also worked on the screenplay. He collaborated on the screenplay with the director, Mr. John Boorman, whom, before the show, you weren't privy to this audience, but I heard Eric say he'd never heard of before. Who out in the class can tell Eric where he's heard of John Boorman before?
Uh-oh. Now I've got to look it up and find out what I missed.
John Boorman, writer and director of Zardoz.
See, it's probably a good thing you didn't lead with that before we did this, because I may have had my views tainted of this movie had I known that the producer of Zardoz was involved in this particular.
The writer-director of Zardoz.
Oh, I'm sorry,
also
the writer-director.
co-wrote and directed this.
On the bright side, at least he wasn't fully writing it. I don't know. But, you know what? That aside, it's a good thing I didn't know ahead of time, because it may have tainted my view. And, spoiler alert, folks, I'm going to just say I thoroughly enjoyed this film.
And I enjoyed it as well. And unlike Zardoz, which featured Sean Connery in a diaper and bandolier, this features Pierce Brosnan in nothing at all. He claims that this was actually the first full nude scene he ever did. We'll get to that shortly. But basically what we have, just to set the scene for this, Tailor of Panama comes out in 2001. this is when Pierce Brosnan has pretty much had it with the 007 role. The role that everybody had wanted him for back in the mid-'80s, the role that he himself had begged for, finally got in 1995 and became disillusioned with by the second film. So
it happens.
After World Is Not Enough, he was pretty disillusioned. It took quite a bit to convince him to come back for Die Another Day. Hey, Ning Shin, how you doing? And so in between The World Is Not Enough and Die Another Day, we have this film. And you can take his character of Andy Osnard as, what would 007 have turned out like really if he behaved like that?
It's kind of like if you took James Bond and stripped away all of his loyalty to Queen and Country. He's still got the swagger. He's still got the way with the ladies, so to speak. He's still got the skills. But what he doesn't have is any loyalty to really anyone but himself. So you could kind of see, this James Bond type character in this role for sure.
And that's actually why I picked the titles that I did, because I thought all of these movies had some form of Bondinessocity to them. And in this case, we have it from the word go. I mean, right at the very beginning, first thing we see is the shot of the MI6 building, which had actually never been allowed in a feature motion picture until The World Is Not Enough. And it had to be approved by Parliament. So this is... Thanks to James Bond, we could have this opening shot. And then as we look in the MI6 building, we have Bond, Osnard, Andy Osnard, basically being dressed down by the functional equivalent of M, and told that he is being assigned to Panama, which basically means that he's being sold up to the river so that he can draw out his remaining days in the service before retirement, because... apparently, he has been something of a cock-up at his previous postings, most recently in Spain, where he was removed from the country after screwing the Prime Minister's mistress.
To be fair, she was just his mistress, not his wife. I mean...
There are some things he won't do for England, and yes, that's a quote, which is also another nice flashback to 007, really. In fact, there are lots of little digs throughout this entire movie that flash back to bad things about 007.
Yeah.
So that's our setup, is that he's being assigned to Panama. Now, when the book was written, it was written to take place just before the handover from the United States government to the government of Panama of the Panama Canal. Because for those who don't know the history of it, when the United States basically bullied its way into getting the Panama Canal built, and then had a 99-year lease on it. Does this sound a lot like Hong Kong? Anyway, then they said, well, we'll give it back to the government of Panama after the lease is up. And people were shocked when they actually did it, because America doesn't do these things. And it's probably thought back and said, damn, why did we do that?
Like, what was that about?
So originally, the novel was set just before the handover. Now, this being 2001, of course, it's set after things have been handed over, but... governments being what they are, they want assurance that things are still going to be stable, that the single most important trade route through the Americas doesn't get disrupted. And so, despite the fact that there are only roughly 200 British citizens living in Panama, Pierce Brosnan, Andy Osnard, is assigned to be the intelligence agent attached to the British embassy so he can find out what's what. And who's he going to find out what's what from?
Geoffrey Rush. I love this character. You've got in Harry Pendle, this Tailor, who is the title character, if you don't know. Just a fantastic character. I just love this character right from the get-go. What did you think about the character of Pendle?
I thought he was one of the most delightful bullshit artists I've ever seen in a movie. And I say that with complete love. I love the idea of the bullshit artist character if it's done well. And that usually involves an intellectual component, which this movie definitely has. Despite the fact that the opening titles are written in a font that is a relative of Comic Sans, don't let that fool you. It starts off feeling like a caper, and he seems like he's going to be the happy heist man type character, where he makes his living by making other people feel good by lying to them all the time. Because, tailor, hairdresser, that sort of thing, you get more business by gossiping and bullshitting with your customers. And that's really Harry Pendle's thing. Of course, he's got some secrets that we'll find out along the way. But I just think he's a really delightful character. He's just a lot of fun. And yes, he's got a dark past, but it's not too dark. And they went out of their way to make sure that it never really taints up, because even though, yes, he's been a liar and he lied to his wife, it actually isn't so bad. He could have done a lot worse. So what if he almost causes the invasion of a sovereign country because our fun little caper suddenly Cthulhu's up? And what the hell, this turned dark.
Yeah, it's quite a drastic change, because at first we're just kind of along for the ride. You think, okay, he's obviously, he's making stuff up. He's telling these stories just to basically kind of, because Brosnan's character comes in there and basically steamrolls him. He's basically like, listen, I know all your secrets, and you're going to give me information that I want so I can get the heck out of here, is what he's looking for.
Or at least make some money.
Yeah, exactly. I don't really think that came into it right away until later on. Quite frankly, I think it was more of a, let me get some information so I can get a big score here and then get posted somewhere that I actually want to be. And then the moment he realizes that Pendle is bullshitting him, that's when he says, okay, now instead of just calling it and being like, okay, we're done here, it's like, no, okay, now I see you used me to get some money for you and your people, and now I'm going to turn around and use you to get myself some money. And that's when I think it clicked that he's like, okay, yeah, this is what's happening now.
And the thing, it's not like he waits most of the movie to figure out that Pendle's a bullshit artist. I mean, he catches him first conversation they have, but figures he's scared him straight by telling him, okay, you tried to shine me on. I know your secrets. Here's what they are. You're an arsonist. You lied to your wife. You've never been on Savile Row. Your whole life here is a fabrication. But because of who all your clients are, like, say, the president of Panama, that sort of thing, you tell me what they say, and we're going to get along famously. And at first he believes it, but really only about halfway through the movie, I think actually during the scene... I think it crystallized during the scene where he arranges to meet Harry in the whorehouse. And ladies and gents, this movie is not safe for work. Don't watch it on your phone at the office.
Well, now you tell me.
Eric may have done this.
But I didn't get caught, so it's all good. Now, I have a nice little nook that I have my phone in. You'd have to walk directly into my view and then around me and behind me before you'd be in view, and I have plenty of time. The way I set my phone, the power button is right on the top. It's a very quick, boom. Movie pauses, screen goes off. How can I help you today?
Which is probably a good thing, because... let's face it, you saw just about every angle of everything in that one scene.
You do see quite a bit. I like the fact that they just have a conversation about serious stuff while sitting on the vibrating bed after he puts the quarter in and just sitting there.
And meanwhile, across the hall, whenever you look at Jeffrey Rush, you can see directly across the hall, and you can see this hooker start going at it with this guy. They change positions 3 times until they're finally done. And there's porn.
Dude wants to get his money's worth. Okay.
There's porn on like 3 TVs. It's just everywhere. And in the middle of this is when Pierce Brosnan knows, he even says it out loud. This is crap, but it's gold. Tell me more.
Yeah, that was that the moment he was telling him about how he's... Yeah, that was where he was telling him, he's like, and they're going to sell it to the Chinese. Well, what do you mean? Like Hong Kong or Taiwan? Both. They're working together. I think that was the moment he's like, what? I don't think so. I think that was the moment that Brosnan's character realized what was going on, and that and half a second later is when he decided, I can make some money off of this.
Because by then, I think he figured out that, okay, if he's bullshitting me, then eventually we're going to get found out. So my career is done with the British government. I know this. I was almost done when I got here. So once he figures that out, then it's like, okay, how can I spin a story so I can be given charge of a whole lot of money in untraceable cash, which I can then, of course, steal because I am an exceptional thief who may or may not have tones of Alan Rickman, except speaking in an Irish accent.
Oh, wait, no, that wasn't the theme that was playing, but it almost could have been.
And, of course, the reason that we have this character wanting to meet in places like whorehouses or even a gay bar, which I thought was kind of hilarious, that particular scene, because Rush's character looked so uncomfortable. And Osnard's just digging it, jamming, chilling, all Basic Instinct and stuff. But there is, along with just the background stuff that you have at the cat house, there's also some pretty hefty sex going on. Pierce Brosnan shows you everything but his plumbing, and while he's doing that, Catherine McCormack shows us absolutely everything, and on multiple occasions, and I can't say that I'm going to complain about that either. And for anyone who regrets the fact that Jamie Lee Curtis never actually had any nude scenes in a Halloween movie, she does do a quick flash here and there as well. And she, of course, plays the character of Mrs. Pendle. And what did you think of how she was handled in this movie?
I thought she was a really interesting character as well. I really liked the fact that she had... she had the ties necessary to make Pendle's character a little bit more believable. You know, she had the possibility of having the information, even though she wasn't giving it to him, and he didn't get any actual information from her because he was making everything up. The fact that she did work where she worked kind of lent a little bit of credibility, kind of pushed the story along. So, but I also like the fact that she was there, and then when she found out about his past, essentially, she kind of didn't care. She was more upset that he had lied to her in the first place rather than what he had lied about. So it was kind of interesting. I liked her character,
and I also like that she obviously weighed, is this worth throwing anything away for? And no. And they were just able to move on, but move on in a believable fashion. Yeah. And one that lets us still like the character of Harry Pendle, which is something that Boorman really wanted to go for, because the ending of Tailor of Panama, the movie, is different than the one in the book.
Okay.
Of course, in the movie, we have, of course, the wonderful tales spun by Harry Pendle so he can keep getting paid so he doesn't go bankrupt. And what he basically does is, through using the names of people he knows, an ex-revolutionary who's now basically a cowardly drunk, his own shop girl, basically, his wife, the president of Panama. He uses all of these names, weaves them in together to a story about a silent opposition that's ready to take over the Panamanian government, because, of course, the Panamanian government is about to sell off the canal to China. And the story is very believable, the way he weaves it. Even though we know it's garbage, he weaves it in such a way that you can see how Osnard, even though he doesn't believe it either, knows he can sell it, and you can see how it in fact gets sold, and how, and all too ready to believe these things, American and British government would just easily swallow it all and think they're getting a bargain by only paying a few tens of millions of dollars to make these problems go away. But after all of this, Harry comes out okay, Panama Canal is safe, and Andy Osnard may get away with a few million, as opposed to winding up being shot.
Right.
Which is how the book ended.
Oh, that would have made me sad. Because as much as we're supposed to hate the Osnard character, I still came away kind of liking him. And I think it was just that, maybe it was that cocky swagger, maybe it was maybe he was spilling over. The effect he has on the ladies worked on me too, I don't know. But I ended up liking that character in the movie, even though I know I shouldn't have. Like, what he was doing was despicable, absolutely. But, oh, come on. Look at that grin. You can't hate him.
And that was the next thing I was wondering, because if it weren't for one thing, I'd feel the same way, because he's really despicable. I mean, he's slimy.
He really is.
Harry Pendle at least is a lovable bullshit artist. He could easily have been Mel Brooks in another movie, honestly. But Pierce Brosnan's character of Osnard, he's just a douche. And he's a liar and a thief and all kinds of nasty things, but I could have forgiven all of that except for the one scene where he tries his hand at being a rapist. Anyone who's heard me talk about these things or read any of my reviews on my website knows that I have very, very strict guidelines about when that's okay in a movie, and this ain't it. Now, he doesn't get to actually get that far, because Jamie Lee Curtis fights him off, but it's bad enough, and I think they could have done this much better without that particular wrinkle in the script. Because otherwise, I'd agree with you. I like his character, except for that.
Yeah, that seemed unnecessary, and I don't feel that it really lent anything to the story, so I'm not really sure why that was necessary, and I had kind of glazed over it because of that fact, because it didn't really add too much. It didn't glare out as bad for me as it must have for you, but it definitely was unnecessary and could have been done without.
Yeah, well, I think most people I know figured out that that's a small trigger point when I watch movies. By now, it's just, too many people, and after a while, yeah. But overall, overlooking that scene, I found this to be an enjoyable movie. In fact, one more just tangential remembrance. When I first saw this film, this is back at a time when a friend of mine and I would see a minimum of 2 movies in a theater every single week. So we would go see whatever the new releases were. Mm-hmm. And this was one of those weeks where there wasn't really a clear contender for some reason. I believe that the other movie that came out that week actually was released earlier, and we'd gone to an earlier showing of it. So when we got to the theater on Friday, it was like, what are we going to see? And it's like, oh, what's this? We'll try that. And this was just when the theater had installed an IMAX screen. It was the first time we'd ever been in the IMAX part of the theater. And being that this was 2001, that was before everybody was doing it. So this was kind of cool. And so, hey, we got to see those scenes with Catherine McCormack in some very, very incredible definition. So I was quite pleased. But yeah, that was the first time that I accidentally saw a movie in IMAX.
Accidentally.
I don't think this was actually filmed on IMAX stock, but they showed it on the IMAX screen, and of course, on the bigger screen, makes a difference, whether you shoot it in IMAX or not.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true, and I've only, I think the first thing I ever saw in IMAX was the Grand Canyon film that they specifically made for IMAX, and that was like one of those, it was really cool to look at, but it was just an educational film about the Grand Canyon. It wasn't storytelling by any stretch of the imagination. I'm trying to think the last movie, like the actual like fiction that I've seen in IMAX, and I can't think of it because it's one of those things that now it's so prevalent. I'm like, an extra $2 when the other screens are pretty much just as big. No, I'll just go in the regular theater. I don't even care. So I get out to the theater so rarely these days anyway that it doesn't really rate highly. I forget what it was what did I watch at IMAX though? I remember it being really awesome. I just can't remember what it was now. Maybe it was episode 1. I don't remember.
Wow.
It's been a while.
That's a ways back.
It's been a while, I'll tell you that much.
I want to say the last one I actually saw on the IMAX screen was Mad Max Fury Road, which was very, very good, by the way.
Just a little more recent.
But, yeah, overall, Tailor of Panama, enjoyable film. Any final thoughts from you?
No, just same thing. Yeah, absolutely. I found it to be a really fun movie. I think if you go into this movie expecting an action spy thriller, you will be disappointed because that's not what this is. This definitely has some drama to it. It has some tension. It has great storytelling, great acting, but I would even classify it almost as a satire, but really well done satire, so that you don't really. It's not like one of these farcical satires, like Mel Brooksian or, anything like that. But it's definitely got that tongue-in-cheekness to it. And if you don't go in with expectations other than that, then you won't be disappointed.
I'd classify it as an espionage caper that goes dark, because it definitely starts off a lot lighter than it ends, but it still maintains some lightness. So I'd say an espionage caper that goes a little dark. So not quite enough to be called a dark comedy, but close. So if you want to see what 007 would turn out like if he was a drunk failure with no ethics, there you go. Pierce Brosnan does a very good job in The Tailor of Panama.
Yeah, I definitely highly recommend checking it out. It's good stuff.
Which has us moving on then from the year 2001 to taking an odyssey to the year 2010. This is the second of 3 of the Brosnan movies we're going to be discussing that was based on a novel. This one is The Ghost Writer, based on the novel The Ghost, written by Robert Harris. Not to be confused with Thomas Harris, so not the guy who wrote Silence of the Lambs. No, Robert Harris is particularly notable for writing historical fiction. In fact, I remember the very first novel of his that I read, and the one that really propelled his name onto the map, also got me some very, very dirty looks from people when I read it. And this is something that you're not going to get in the era of e-readers, because, of course, all anyone ever sees is your Nokia, your Kindle cover, or your iPad cover. They don't see the cover of the book. And the first book of his that I read was called Fatherland, which is an alternate history novel supposing that the Nazis won World War II, and it takes place in the 1960s. And there is a gigantic gold swastika on the cover. So I'm walking around town, reading a book with a giant gold swastika on the cover, getting some interesting looks.
It's at that point you realize that maybe you should have invested in a dust jacket. Or made one, like in grade school. Did you ever make one out of like the paper bag or the newspaper?
That was one of the fun days of class. They basically gave you most of the day to do that for all your textbooks. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, kids. We're tired of like teaching stuff, and we really just want to kind of kick back over here with our coffee. And so it's book cover day, everybody. Have fun. We'll come back and check on you in a couple hours.
But for those of you who are interested in alternate history, Fatherland is actually a very good novel. I do recommend checking it out. The made-for-HBO movie that came out later, starring Rutger Hauer. I love Rutger Hauer. I do, really. But the movie is low mediocre at best. Now, on another side of the coin, and I have a sneaking suspicion because Eric let something slip, bad.
Oh, sorry. Normally we don't talk about anything about these movies or books or anything that we're going to discuss on the show before we actually sit down to record, so that all of our reactions are kind of, boom, there it is. We a couple of things got bounced around before this episode, just kind of offhand, but yeah.
So, with that in mind, sure you may already have an inkling, since I've mentioned that I enjoy the previous work of Robert Harris, and much like John le Carré worked on Tailor of Panama, Robert Harris also helped adapt his own screenplay, and the film was directed by Mr. Can't Come Back to the United States because some prosecutors just won't leave things alone even when the victim says, "Stop already," Mr. Roman Polanski. So, what did you think of The Ghostwriter?
I think this movie started off great. I liked the beginning, I liked the premise, I liked how things were building up. Got about maybe halfway, maybe a little less than halfway, and I felt things started to really slow, almost to the point of dragging. And then the ending, I was just like, WTF, mate. I was severely let down, I would say. I think this movie had, and I don't know, how the book ended on which it was written. I'm assuming it was similar since it was the same, since the author was working on the screenplay as well. I just felt let down at the end of this film, and I think you disagree with me, but yeah, that was my overall impression of the film. Was by the time when it was over, when credits were rolling, I was like, oh, all right.
The book does end on very similar lines to the movie, not quite the same, but close enough for government work. And speaking of government work, basically...
Nice segue.
Thank you. Basically what we have in this book is we have Ewan McGregor starring as the Ghost. He is, in fact, never given a name. He is not given a name in the book either. And what he is he's a professional ghostwriter. So the people who help your favorite celebrities who probably can't write very well, or at least not as articulately as a publisher would like in order to sell some books. So he's the one who interviews the subject of the autobiography, makes it look pretty so that the autobiographer can then publish it under his or her own name. And in this case, he is asked to ghostwrite the memoirs of the former British Prime Minister, Adam Lang, who is absolutely positively in no way, shape, or form at all supposed to resemble Tony Blair. Nope, nope, really, he's not. Promise, not even because this Robert Harris quickly started writing this book as soon as Tony Blair got out of office. Nope, couldn't possibly be anything like Tony Blair, except he is.
So this totally not Tony Blair character, tell us more.
This totally not Tony Blair character, the former Prime Minister, is played by Pierce Brosnan.
Oh, funny he should turn up in this.
Ain't it, though? And it turns out that someone who had been a close attaché of former Prime Minister Lang had been working on the autobiography, but then suddenly got a case of being dead.
Oh, I hate
Specifically,
that.
He was found having gone over the side of a ferry boat in Massachusetts because, of course, Mr. Lang is on a tour of the United States and he's staying at Martha's Vineyard, which is absolutely positively not supposed to look like Germany at all, even though it had to be because, of course, the director can't go to Martha's Vineyard. But anyway, so after the previous ghostwriter has a case of being dead, we have our new ghost picked up and he's told, look, there's already a 624-page manuscript, which happens to be the exact same number of pages as Tony Blair's autobiography, by the way, even though they're not the same character.
That's hilarious. I did not know that. That's funny.
And so he says, we already have this manuscript. It just sucks balls. So if you could please come down for 30 days, talk to Adam Lang, rewrite this manuscript. I mean, it's mostly done for you. You just need to make it not suck. And we'll pay you $250,000. And he says, okay, I like money.
All right.
So we have Ewan McGregor flying down to the United States, where he meets Adam Lang's personal secretary, played by Kim Cattrall, from either Sex and the City or Star Trek VI, depending how you want to remember her, or perhaps even Stripes, if you want to remember that far back.
I'll go Star Trek VI. I'll choose that to be how I remember her.
That's usually how I go. And she has a horrendous British accent, which occasionally she forgets to put on. She remembers to put everything else on, though, for those of you who are used to seeing her in other projects where she sometimes doesn't put anything on. Just since we were discussing that in previous film, thought I'd give you the public service announcement. We also meet the Prime Minister's wife, played by Olivia Williams, whom some others might recognize from the movie Sabotage with Arnold Schwarzenegger, where she put on an American accent that she sometimes forgot. In this movie, she gets to be British, which she is.
I've never seen Sabotage, but I know I had seen her in something else before, and I couldn't place it. I was watching it, and I was like, I know I've seen her in something. Let me look at her picture real quick here, and I'll tell you. Oh, Dollhouse.
Okay.
The Joss Whedon TV show on Fox, which was actually a really great show, and another one of his projects that got canceled before its time, I think. Although, I wouldn't necessarily say canceled before its time, considering the last half a season or so wasn't strong. But either way, that's what I think I remembered her from more than anything else. She was kind of the big boss person on that.
Funny you should mention that, because she seems to be kind of the brains of this marriage, even though, of course, she's married to the former Prime Minister, who is not necessarily the most leadership timber character you've ever seen.
No, he's a bit of a hothead. Yeah, we see that. He's kind of quick to blow up, quick to anger, fairly quick to cool off again, as well as many hotheads are. But yes, you definitely get the impression right away that's like, wow, this person was leading a country. You're like, okay.
He's kind of a half in the bag womanizing frat boy. I mean, and it's really odd to see Pierce Brosnan in a role like this, just because you usually see him tailored, sharp, looking together. I mean, even when he's playing the alcoholic in, a James Bond movie, or playing the alcoholic in Tailor of Panama, he's still sharp, put together. Even in a Hawaiian shirt, he's put together. Whereas here, he's splayed out Al Bundy style in jogging pants, just totally letting go, looking like a slob. Did that kind of slap you in the face when you first saw that?
Not so much, because again, he's acting, so I anticipate it to be different. I was a little, being that we were focusing on Brosnan films, I did go into this expecting him to be maybe in it more. And he's almost a secondary character in this to everything else that's going on. It's like, yeah, he's a major character, but at the same time, he's not necessarily the major character. He's not the title character.
No, he is definitely he is definitely in the list of supporting actors. I'd say he's the supporting lead, but he is definitely in the list of supporting actors. And even as a supporting lead, he doesn't have a whole lot of screen time comparatively. He gets maybe 20% if we're lucky. But I still think it carries some interesting Bondinessocity, not only because of how we end up in an espionage plot, hold that thought, but also he's the Prime Minister. This is the ultimate goal of British government. So we've had him go from being British agent to now Prime Minister. It's an interesting switch.
Which I don't think I could ever see James Bond doing, unless it was an undercover assignment to get to some other head of state in some other country or something like that. I don't see James Bond actually ever being Prime Minister.
No, I think he has too much disdain for politics.
Yeah, not to mention the fact that he probably would never live that long. Either a counterintelligence agent from another country or the booze are going to get to him way before that.
And besides that, what's he going to say he was doing for a living? Because, of course, in the real world, spies don't actually talk about what they used to do for a living. In fact, it used to be a problem for people who worked for the National Security Agency that if you ever left, everybody's official position on the resumes they were allowed to make public was gardener. So there were a lot of gardeners employed in Maryland who could not say what the hell they did for a living.
Like, well, I garden. I mean, that's what. Look at the resume. I garden. I garden the crap out of some gardens over there.
Fertilized a few.
You want some grass? I can do that. You want some flowers? I can do that. I could flower the hell out of a flower bed. I tell you that right now. Yeah. So what else is going on?
What else is going on is, while we have a former prime minister who appears to have the social life of Bill Clinton, right down to screwing his aide, pretty much openly, we also have the political problems of administrations that came after Mr. Clinton. Specifically, he suddenly, just a few days after the ghost gets to America and settles himself in, we find out that the former prime minister is being accused of helping Americans to illegally capture British citizens and get them put on planes where they can be tortured, waterboarded, and have all kinds of human rights violations happen to them. And so now he's in the middle of a gigantic scandal where he's being considered for war crimes at The Hague, while the Americans, who of course do not recognize in the international court, are the only people who seem to be his allies.
We're too good for that. International courts, got the Court of America. We don't need no international courts. Yeah, it's kind of convenient that he's taken his tour right then in America, so he's able to just kind of hang out there. And it's like, well, they're not going to do anything about me, so here I am. But yeah, you get that kind of feeling, and again, it's very similar. I mean, the entire storyline is definitely pulled from the headlines as far as this stuff is. We hear about it going on all the time, and then we see it get covered up, or, oh, no, that didn't really happen. It was blown out of proportion. Or
Yeah, this is very much an obviously ripped from the headlines first book by Mr. Harris and then movie. And it even then delves into the realm of some popular conspiracy theories that were floating around, not necessarily involving the same sets of supporting arms doing what to whom, but still, namely, people wondering if the former British Prime Minister, who amazingly never once in his term of office did anything contrary to the interests of the United States of America, may have been in the pocket of the United States of America somehow. And this is something that our ghostwriter starts to wonder himself as he starts uncovering details of the death of his predecessor. And he's wondering if maybe it's a conspiracy of, say, the American CIA?
What?
Could the former Prime Minister himself have been a CIA agent?
Well, no, because he's MI6. How could he be CIA? Oh, wait, no, that's James Bond again. That's not this character. Oh, man, I get so confused. Yeah, you get this kind of drama. Now, here's the thing. The big reveal. I don't know how... This movie is 5 years old, and we're not known for keeping this show spoiler-free. This is a pretty big one for this one, though. So if... I don't know, how far do we want to go in spoiling this film? Are we just doing our normal... Screw it. If we're talking about it, we're going to spoil it, so buyer beware? Or are we going to try to hold back and
tell you what,
keep a little bit
let's
secret?
hold back on this one, because we ruined the book and the movie on the previous one.
That was 14 years old, so I think fair is fair on that one.
And You're right. Normally we're not spoiler free, but okay, let's hold off on the big reveal. I think we can talk enough about this one without doing the big reveal, because we didn't do the big reveal on Murder on the Orient Express either. So I think that's fair.
Oh, dang, I did it. Oh. On the Orient Express. Oh, I did it again, damn it. No, okay, so what I will say about the big reveal is that there are many hints dropped along the way, some of which I feel like I caught as they were dropped, and others that I looked back on and said, okay, now I see why they were saying that. So this is definitely not a movie that's going to surprise you the second time around at all. If anything, it's even more blatant. Just thinking back on some of the scenes, there's some things that are said that just make it even more blatant how it's going to end up. So, but there are some that were just so kind of glaring right from the get-go that I was looking at it thinking, okay, this is how this is going to play out. And I started even thinking, I had an inkling of how it was going to go probably a little past halfway through. I wasn't sure. It wasn't like, oh, I know what's happening. But it was more like, I wouldn't be surprised if this is what happens. And sure enough, I wasn't that surprised because that's what ended up happening. Was it that way for you too, or did it sneak up on you a little bit more?
I had the advantage of I read the book when it came out.
Oh, all right. Well, then.
So I knew exactly what was going to happen. With that said, there's long enough in between that I could still enjoy this as a movie, standing alone on its own. It does play very similar to the book in a lot of ways, but I will say that this story is a better book than it is a movie. I think that there are some elements of subtlety that really can't translate off the page, that just because of the very nature of the audiovisuals of film and the brevity of time involved with how long you have to watch a film, there's just some subtlety that you can't have work the same way. As we've discussed before, they're two different media. And this story, the subtleties work very well in the book and in the movie, even with someone like Polanski at the helm, whom it doesn't matter what you think of his personal life, whether you think he's a pig who belongs in jail, a pig who doesn't belong in jail, or a great auteur, whatever you think of him, doesn't matter. As a filmmaker, he's very much a mood filmmaker, and that both helps and hurts this story. It helps in terms of, this is not an action-packed story. There's not a whole lot of distractions that can go on where things explode that can give you something to glom onto while you're waiting for the intrigue to play out. It's intrigue and nothing but intrigue. There's no comic relief. There's no explosions. The moments where people get a case of the dead are subtle or small. So you have to have mood. And if you're doing this in a single sitting, this is not something you can pause and even pee for. Because if you break the mood at all, you're done. It doesn't work anymore. But if you're into mood pieces, then this plays. It'll work. It's a rental. It's not a buy, but it plays. Whereas if you don't have the patience for that sort of thing, and it sounds like Eric doesn't, and especially if you get up to pee, you're screwed. Because then this is really boring.
Yeah, that's kind of where I fell on it. It's not that the entire movie was boring. It wasn't like I'm bored from the get-go type of situation. It was just more of it seemed very slow to me, and then the big reveal at the end just didn't have enough punch, and maybe that was because I had kind of already leaned towards that as what I was thinking. One of the big clues that Ewan McGregor's character doesn't figure out until the very end, I figured that out the first time they said it. Like, the very first time I said it, I'm like, oh, I know what he needs to do. And I just kept waiting. Come on, you've got it. Right.
And I think
there.
That's one of the subtleties that plays better in the book. Because in the book, it doesn't carry a tone of voice. It doesn't carry volume. It's just something you can easily glom over with your eyes and not catch it. Whereas in the movie, oh no, there's a point. It's obvious. There's a point to them saying those words.
Yeah, and I think those type of things, the fact that I'm like, okay, I know for a fact, and the fact that, even knowing that, I could kind of go back a little bit and, they've shown enough of the clue that he's supposed to be looking at that you can start to piece together the big reveal well before the big reveal. And there's other clues, like I said, as well, some more heavy-handed than others that kind of point you in that direction. When they're talking about how, all these decisions that he's made have been benefiting the United States, and then you think, well, but just a second ago they said, So, I don't even want to give away what the clue was because I think it's so blatantly obvious that it gives away the actual reveal. So, I thought that the clues were maybe a little too heavy-handed. I like to be surprised when there's a satisfaction in being like, hey, I figured it out. But I didn't feel like I had to work that hard to do so. So I didn't get that sense of satisfaction that I sometimes get. Watching a mystery and you know there's gonna be twists and turns, and if you can figure out who done it, and you get to the end and you're still surprised and delighted, and you're even more so because you figured it out, rather than being let down because you figured it out. In this one, I felt let down because I had figured it out. I felt like they had handed it to me on a platter, and I don't know. That's just my take on it.
I think I might have felt that way if I hadn't read the book already, just because since I'd read the book, it couldn't be spoiled for me. Sure. So I wasn't necessarily feeling like, well, I figured this out a long time, because I figured it out before I even pressed play.
Right.
So that kind of thing wasn't going to bother me. And as someone who tends to appreciate the moody, I went with the mood and I was okay with it. I didn't get bored with it. And because I was letting the mood take me, I didn't necessarily care about anything else. Whereas if the mood isn't grabbing you, yeah, you're screwed. Then this doesn't work at all. It is very much this one's going to depend on some very specific tastes. This is not quite art house, but it plays along similar sensibilities.
Gotcha. I guess I just don't have those sensibilities at all. But, so my take on it was meh, and you obviously felt it was much better than that. So, listeners,
I think it's a good rental is how I come out with it.
All right.
It's not something that I'd want to buy for my permanent collection, but it's a good rental. Now, before we drop this, though, any final thoughts on Mr. Brosnan in this movie?
Oh, I think he did a fantastic job. I actually really enjoyed, I meant to say if I didn't, I really enjoyed all the acting in this movie. I thought it was very good. I thought Ewan McGregor did a fantastic job. I love Timothy Hutton, so I love when he turns up in a film, and he was fantastic. Kim Cattrall was fine in her character, accent or sometimes, whatever you want to call it. She still, played her part. And I think that Olivia Williams, who played the character of Ruth Lang, did a fantastic job. I really loved her acting in it. So, from an acting perspective, top notch across the board. Didn't have no complaints there.
I just want to throw in one more thing, since we've gone through most of the supporting cast. I like the cameo by Eli Wallach. I thought that was very well done. The old man in the shack. And it just was weird seeing Jim Belushi in this movie. Because this is not the kind of movie you expect Jim Belushi to show up in. Especially not bald. Because he doesn't normally go that way. So, I mean, he played his part well.
Yeah, definitely. He was not... I didn't notice it was James Belushi until his scene was almost over. And then I was like, hey, wait a minute. Oh, yeah, that is him. So that speaks volumes, actually, because normally he shows up on screen. It's like, it's Jim Belushi. All right, whatever. Just, okay, be Jim Belushi for a few minutes, and then we'll be done with you. No, he played his part. He wasn't Jim Belushi. He was his character, John Maddox. He was his character, and it was good. So I'm like, hey, dude actually can act, I guess. Don't know why he's chosen not to in everything musician. Else he's in.
I've actually been to one of his concerts. Does a very good job.
All right, fair enough.
And I tend to enjoy his movies as well.
Awesome. Hey, like I said, acting, no complaints here. For me, it was all about the storytelling and the slowness, and like you said, the mood. It didn't suck me in enough to keep me there, and for me, I felt let down at the end. So. Again, as always, we encourage our listeners to go and watch the film. This isn't one that I would say, no, don't watch. I'd say, okay, go ahead and watch it, but under the caveat that, hey, maybe it's not as exciting as some other films that we've talked about. But I'd love to hear your take on it. So do feel free to hit us up on our Facebook page at facebook.com/HerMajesty'sPod or tweet us at HerMajesty'sPod. Leave a comment on this episode on our website, HerMajesty'sPod.com, or shoot us an email directly. You can reach me, Eric, at foureyedradio.com or Eric at HerMajesty'sPod.com if it's easier. And
you can also reach me at Ziggy at CinemaOnTheRocks.com. And you can also find me on Twitter at CinemaOTR. And I'd also like to take a moment to give a quick shout out to Steve, who was one of our winners on our last show for the Question Judgment Contest, who did drop me a line. And we very much appreciate that you pointed out that our download links weren't working. Eric has fixed them.
Yes.
So thank you very much, Steve. And once again, thank you for your entry in our contest and how that helped make our last show. We very much appreciate it, and you, and all of you.
We love you. We love you for loving us. We feel it. We feel the love. But yeah, so definitely, I would say, like you said, it's worth a rental. I think you can do a 2-day streaming rental on Amazon for this for $3. You might be able to find it. I don't know if you'd find this one in a Redbox. You'd have to do some searching probably for a movie that's 5 years old. But I'm sure you can find it somewhere without expending too much money on it.
Indeed. Now, one thing that I think you will be able to find at a Redbox, because it is very recent and it is all over the place. I see it in lots of such kiosks. I see it at basically every big box retailer I walk into. Is The November Man from last year.
Yes, and this one's actually available on Netflix as well. So if you have Netflix, you can just, as of right now, as of the recording of this episode, I should say, because things do come and go. But as of right now, this one is available on Netflix.
Indeed. And this is the third of the 3 movies that we're talking about with Brosnan in them that was based on a novel. This is part of a series of novels, which Brosnan was very hopeful was going to be a franchise. In fact, even before this movie came out in the theater, he said he was already excited to be working on the second one. It is co-produced by his production company, Irish Dreamtime, and out of all the movies that we've watched this time around, this is the one where he's the freest with his Irish accent, even though he's playing a CIA agent, but we'll get there. What's interesting is this is based on the 007th of 13 novels in a series. So it's not like he starts at the beginning.
Where have we seen that before?
I know, right?
No successful movie franchise could ever start with anything but the first book in the series, right?
Right.
No, we already know that's not true. Just look at any of the Tom Clancy movies. Obviously, the James Bond movies themselves. There are others. A lot of these serial franchises in books, you can jump around pretty easily because they're designed to be episodic in nature. They're designed so that anybody could pick up any one of the books and get to know the character without having to have read all the books leading up to that. Hopefully they want to go back. I've had that happen to me several times. I picked up one of Michael Connelly's Harry Bosch novels. I didn't pick up the first one in the series. I picked up whichever one happened to be on the library shelf, and I read it and loved it. And then I went back and said, okay, what order did these actually come in? And went back and made sure to find each one in order and read them. But, it still grabbed me picking one at random and just like, okay, I'll give this a shot. And it still worked.
I have a hard time doing that with books. I tend to try and read them in order. So if I'm going to pick up something new, I try to read the first. If I find out I picked up in the middle of a series, I get kind of mad.
God dang it.
Or if I'm in a bookstore and I see they only have the third in a series, I won't pick it up at all. If I know it's part of a series, if I pick it up and didn't know, then I'll just be a little upset with myself and maybe go back. But I try to read them in order. Now, this doesn't always work. There are series designed to frustrate you. I'm looking at you, Isaac Asimov's Foundation. Holy shit. Not written in order at all. So what order do you read them in? Do you read them in the order he wrote them? Do you read them chronologically as they happen? It's Asimov. It doesn't matter. They're all good. Okay?
Grab it and read it.
I actually ended up reading them in chronological order, which is an interesting way to go because you can definitely tell the difference between the books that were written in the 80s and the books that were written decades earlier. But if anyone hasn't read the Foundation series, did I just hear you say you hadn't, Eric?
I don't think I've read them all. I've read a couple, I think. I don't even know. I would have to actually look at them, and I'd probably have to read their covers to see. I'm like, oh, yeah, that one I've read. It was a long time ago, I'll tell you that. So
I will say that this is one where you probably want to wiki up a list of which books count because Asimov's universes collide. They're all consistent. And so there is overlap between Foundation and Empire and Robots. So they all work together. And in fact, the way that it meshes in with all of them is very, very important. One could say that Foundation is the very foundation of his universe. So anyway, for those who haven't read Asimov's Foundation books, highly recommended. But now we get back to the November Man books, which, again, there have been, I think, 13 novels so far, if I remember correctly. And the movie that we're seeing as the November Man is number 007, based on a novel called There Are No Spies, which was written in 1987. So, yeah, we've done some adaptation. How much? I have no idea. I've never read any of these books.
I might be interested to check them out. I'm going to take a look and see how easy they are to come by on Nook or Kindle, and I might give one or two a read and see how they play out, because I don't believe that I've read any of them, so I'll definitely have to check.
All right. So why don't you give the audience your introduction to the November Man?
Well, I'll be honest with you. This one is one that we had talked about briefly when it had first come out. You had seen it in theaters, I believe, and you'd given it a brief, not a review necessarily, but just a brief, plug around that time. And I was going to try and catch it in the theaters, and I never got a chance to. And then it came out, and it was on Netflix a couple months back. And I was like, oh, yeah, hey, I never saw this one. It's on Netflix, all fired up, and I watched it. And at the time, my general impression was kind of meh. Not bad meh, but meh. It didn't grab me really. It didn't seem as exciting as action thrillers as I want them. But then I rewatched it again for this show, and I got to say, the second time through, I liked it quite a bit more. I can't really tell you why. I can't really put my finger on exactly what it was the second time through that grabbed me more than the first time through, but I thought the action scenes were good. I thought they were well thought out. I liked the fact that we had some pretty gritty fight scenes. There were obvious choreographed fight scenes, as they are in movies, of course. You don't get that real down and dirty stuff, but it was close enough that you really felt it. So I really dug the fight scenes. The plot, I mean, it's an action film. I'm not going to pick apart the plot too much when it comes to these sorts of things. It's, the plot is there to string together the action bits as far as I'm concerned, and I think it does a good enough job of that. Yeah, it strings together the action without leaving you completely in disbelief. So I think it works in that respect. Fairly good acting all the way around. Brosnan's fantastic in it. He, essentially he plays an older version of, if 007 was CIA instead of MI6, and just an older version. So yeah, he's got the part down, that's for sure. And so I would say I definitely do recommend this. If you had asked me 2 months ago after I'd watched it the first time, I might not have said so, but now, yeah.
See, the way I look at the character of Peter Devereaux, which is Brosnan's character in The November Man, one of the things that struck me specifically, and I remember mentioning this in my little capsule of it before, is that even though Peter Devereaux carries the framework of James Bond, I mean, secret agent, yes, he's working for the CIA instead of the British government, even though, full-on Irish accent, so we're just assuming he's from Boston or something. Or they have great international recruiting, because, of course, hey, Simon Pegg is on the IMF, but anyway. But yes, he's got the similar circumstance, and of course he's regarded as the legendary agent of that particular group, but he's not James Bond. He doesn't play it smooth. He doesn't really go after the ladies. In fact, he has a rule against it. We find out there's a little bit of breakage there, but he's definitely not the super playboy, yeah, baby, yeah. I mean, he's not that at all. Mainly what we get is the three things that are consistent. He's a great agent, he's a fantastic shot, and he's alcoholic. I mean, he's a major alcoholic, like raiding the minibar every time if he sees a bottle, it's in his hand, and then it's in his mouth. I mean, it's just right there. He's a total alcoholic. But if he's any James Bond, I think he's Ian Fleming's James Bond, without the sex. Because as another character describes him, and I think it's described beautifully, he is one bleak motherfucker. To use an exact quote from the movie. I mean, damn, this dude is dark. In fact, there's one scene from this movie, and I bet you already know which one I'm thinking of, that just jumps out at me as one of the just darkest, bleakest scenes in any of these sorts of movies that I've ever seen. I remember in the theater, I watched this happen, and my jaw's just like, ah! It hit the floor. And I think I need to spoil this scene.
I think on this one, like I said, this is more your prototypical action thriller as opposed to a psychological or dramatic thriller. So I think you can go ahead, and major plot points are not going to be... There's no like huge twist like, oh my gosh, I didn't see that coming. It's pretty straightforward throughout. So I don't think spoiling this one's really going to ruin the experience.
And this is a visceral experience, watching this particular scene. It's about halfway through, and we have Devereaux, who has another character who's been dogging after him, and he needs to put this guy off for a little bit, and so he needs him distracted. And this other character has just had an on-camera sex scene with his next-door neighbor. And so in the post-bliss, this other character's fallen asleep, wakes up to hear the sound of his phone ringing. It looks to be from the woman calling him. Turns out that she's in the next room. And there is Devereaux, holding a gun to her head.
Yeah.
And basically doing the, okay, asshole, now what are you going to do? Is this woman worth saving? What is she worth to you? And this is not the sort of thing we ever picture any James Bond we want to associate with ever doing. He is threatening an innocent woman just basically to cheese off the other guy. And so he's saying, do you want me to kill her? Because it's basically, if you do anything to get in my way, it's as good as you killing her yourself. Because in order to get to me, you have to let me kill her. And so he's got this guy on the edge, and then he gets up, and instead of shooting her, he does something that's even creepier. He looks at him and he says, okay, here's your scenario. Woman you've just been intimate with. Agent cuts her femoral artery. What do you do? And he takes a knife, he cuts her femoral artery, and leaves.
Says, peace, homie. Now, to be fair, yes, that was powerful. And it was one of those scenes...
And it's more powerful than I made it sound, trust me.
Yeah, it's dark, and it's powerful, but it puts you into the... For me, it was a defining moment for that character, because here's a character that I don't think would have necessarily done that in that particular situation 2 days before, 3 days before, however long it was that that particular agent who he's trying to cheese off, as you said, put a bullet through somebody's head who was very important to him. So he's kind of in this mindset where he's always been on that edge, and now it's like he's been pushed slightly over it. Now, you don't get to necessarily see that, and I don't know if this is in the previous books, because like you said, the title of the movie comes from a line later on in the film where he tells them, it's like, you know what we used to call you? The November Man, because after you passed through, nothing lived. I'm like, all right, that almost makes sense, I suppose. I guess in certain parts of the world, everything dies in November. I don't know, I've lived in Arizona all my life. I'm like, what does that even mean? But... you don't really get that sense to me, you get the sense that the character was, yes, he's a hard ass, he's good at his job, he kills who needs to be killed, but you also see him, near the beginning of the film, you see him with a soft spot. He sees that, some collateral damage happened, and he cared. He was upset by that. He was visibly upset by it. He did not want it to happen. That's why he was so pissed off to begin with at the other characters, because he's like, I told you not to do that. So I don't think... 2 days, 3 days prior, however long it was between the one scene and that scene, I don't think it would have gone down necessarily that way.
And I agree with you. I think it is a defining moment of the character, and I think it's something that happens due to circumstance, and I think it's a defining moment for both, because I don't think Devereaux would have done it a few days earlier, and I don't think the other character would have reacted the same way a few days earlier. I think creepily enough, it's where they find common ground.
And it is an interesting relationship that these two characters have throughout the film, going back and forth. It's interesting. In fact, that might be my one complaint about the film, is that I think the relationship between these two characters, the resolution between them didn't sit well with me. I didn't think that that's something on both sides. Yes, they both did bad things to each other, but I still don't think that there's that much forgiveness that quickly. to where, no, they weren't best buds or anything, but there was more resolution there in that relationship than I felt two human beings were probably capable of.
I think the resolution came as a result of the collateral involved for that particular moment.
Yeah.
Because that kind of collateral passes through a lot of walls.
That is true. I will give that. Anytime you're dealing with, you got a kid in the situation, that kind of softens everybody up a little bit.
But so along with that powerful scene, you also have some very good action. It's definitely not the highest end of action. If you're going to compare this to any average Bond action, most Bond action is going to overtake this pretty easily. I mean, now granted, Bond is the high standard of action as far as we're concerned anyway. But that's not to say this is bad. It's just, as Eric said, it is a standard action flick. I think the auto chases went pretty well. Mm-hmm. Rather like the hotel shootout. Thought that went very well. The initial chase where he picks up the girl was interesting, and the girl, of course, has another Bond connection.
Yes.
For she was the Bond girl, if you could call her a Bond girl, in Quantum of Solace.
Yeah. Olga Kurylenko? I'm probably butchering that horribly.
And I would not have recognized her per se, except for seeing her name on the poster and then drawing the parallel. It's just... Yeah. But I think that's because she didn't really stand out for me in Quantum of Solace. I actually think she's more memorable in this movie than she was in that one.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. Also, I think the funny thing to me is that I recognized her on the poster as being the same girl without even looking at the name. I recognized the picture on the poster of her. I was like, oh, hey, she was in Quantum of Solace. But then in the film, it took me a second to realize that was the same person I was looking at. I was like, oh, okay. All right. Oh, yeah, okay, all right. That's who I'm looking at here.
I have a theory about that.
All right.
When you're seeing her on film, you're seeing her in full color. The poster, she's in black and white, and you've also seen her in black and white on several of the Quantum of Solace posters.
That's true. Even the colored Quantum of Solace posters were muted color at best, so it's very true. Maybe that's what it is.
It's a theory.
We'll go with it. I'll allow it. No.
Now, what did you think of her in the film?
I thought she did a good job. I mean, for what she was, I thought it was a cool character idea. I liked the idea of the character, and I think she pulled it off fairly well. Maybe not the strongest ever, but all in all, I'd give it a good solid B+.
I'd say that's pretty fair, especially given what she has to work with, which is to say an alleged surprise that surprises nobody. I mean, I don't think there was even a moment where I didn't know who she was in terms of the story, even though we're not supposed to figure it out for a very long time. It's just so obvious before we even start. But this being the kind of movie it is, it's not a slow burn intrigue piece like The Ghost Rider was. This is standard action, so, oh, yeah, this will surprise nobody. Who cares?
But it's
Chase
okay.
scene!
Yeah, exactly.
All right!
Here we're going to have some action, we're going to have some gratuitous nudity, not full on, but, some, even though the movie was rated R, I don't know that it really got past PG-13 on the sexual side.
On the sexual side, I don't think it did. On the violent side, I think it did.
Yeah, I think you get your R right there with the slicing of the femoral artery. I think you get your R right there. So definitely, it isn't an R-rated film for those of you who might want to be like, hey kids, let's sit down and watch a movie. Maybe not the best.
I would say that is in fact the most violent of the movies we're talking about.
Yeah, it's
and I would say that the Tailor of Panama is the most sexual.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that. Although there was some in the next film we'll talk about as well, which kind of surprises me. Looking at that and then seeing the rating that it got in comparison, I was kind of like, wow, okay. But yeah, all in all, I would say fun movie, especially since it's available on Netflix. If you got Netflix, fire it up, give it a watch. Probably won't be disappointed as long as you don't go in expecting anything other than what it is.
Yeah, and it is very much. What you see is what you get. I think the strength of this movie very specifically is Pierce Brosnan and his performance. And I think the fact that he was James Bond and that this character is a dark contrast to that actually helps. I'm sorry that it looks like he probably won't get the franchise he wanted because, A, even though it seems to be doing pretty well on the home video market, November Man did not necessarily do as well as anyone wanted it to in the theaters. Plus, there's a small fact that Relativity Media just went bankrupt, and they are the studio that actually put the film out.
Oops.
So, yeah, that's other news that's happening right now, by the way. Anyone who follows motion pictures, Relativity Media is going bankrupt. They're not quite dead yet, but they're almost there, and a lot of things have been put off. So, but another thing that strikes me about this film is, damn, everyone in charge of the CIA is an asshole in this movie. Just over the top. And they picked two actors who are very good actors, Bill Smitrovich and Will Patton. They're both very good at what they do, and what they do is play characters who automatically make you want to punch them in the face because they just play assholes beautifully. This is what they do. This is their job. This is the same job Stephen Lang has. This is the same job Ron Silver used to have, and they're very good at it. And the fact that I want to punch these two guys is a testament to their skill as actors.
Yeah, very true. Yeah. Will Patton's character in this is the consummate jerk, just as you would, as is expected. And who's the guy who plays the Hanley character?
Bill Smitrovich.
Yes, that's the other one. Mm-hmm.
He's one of those guys who you don't necessarily know him by name, but you see, he's like, I've seen that guy before, and I hated him.
I wanted to punch that guy before in this other movie too. Yeah, absolutely.
And then, of course, we have the character of Mason, played by Luke Bracey, who is otherwise known for starring in the Death Race sequels that went straight to video.
Oh, that's where I'd seen him before. No, not at all.
He's, I think, the weakest link in the movie. I mean, he's not bad. He's not horrible. You can take him or leave him. He was a replacement for Bradley Cooper, who I think would have been much more engaging.
Oh, yeah, for
but
sure.
I don't know how that scene with the femoral artery would have played out. Yeah, but I bet it would have been well acted.
Yeah, definitely. What's funny is I kept seeing him. I kept thinking, is this like, is this like Chris Hemsworth, like cousin or something? Like, he just kind of had that. It was like a low rent Chris Hemsworth to me. That's kind of what he came off as.
See,
maybe it's just the Australian accent and the general, kind of generic. I want to say generic good looks. Like, he's an okay looking dude, I guess, but it's very generic good looks to me.
He struck me as kind of a knockoff between Luke Perry and Paul Walker.
Ouch! I don't know if that sounds like an insult. I'm just going to say that. That sounds like an insult. Even more so than my low-rent Chris Hemsworth comment.
And the low-rent Chris Hemsworth is Liam Hemsworth, who you can see in the second Expendables movie.
There you go. Yeah. So, yeah, I would say, hey, no offense to Luke Bracey. Hey, keep up the work. Keep trying. You'll get there someday. But as far as the acting goes, definitely the weakest link, I think, of who we saw. Although I wouldn't say necessarily the weakest link, because I think the least believable character is the Celia character. I don't even know if you catch her name at any point, but the character.
The assassin.
The Katerina Scorzone, I believe is her name.
Yeah.
She's beautiful, absolutely stunning woman, but how she goes from just like, okay, when she was like basically a desk jockey helping out, okay, I could see that. When all of a sudden she was supposed to be the hard-ass interrogator, I was like, what? No. This, no. Not believable at all. Like, I like looking at her, hey. But no, I think that was probably, as far as the acting of any of the characters that got a lot of screen time goes, that was probably the weakest link for me. And I've heard she's really good in other things. I think she was on one of those medical dramas that I don't watch, but evidently I've heard that she was really good in that.
Overall, I would say that November Man is definitely worth the time. I actually own it. I enjoyed it that much. It is definitely Pierce Brosnan's movie. Yes, he's got some good supporting help, and he's got an interesting character to play. But it is definitely his movie to win or lose. I think he wins with it. And also, on another note, if you want to see a similar conspiracy theory to the one in the movie we talked about a moment ago, The Ghost Rider, except played as an action movie, that's November Man.
There you go.
Can you see it?
Yeah, you definitely have that that aspect too. This kind of, without giving too much away, this person in the pocket of another country kind of doing their bidding, and you definitely get to see that.
Yeah. But that's going to do it for the November Man, which is going to bring us to the most recent of our films. In fact, it just came out in theory either end of June or beginning of July. I now forget which, but it's been out less than 2 months. Came out simultaneously in very limited release, nowhere near me, and on video on demand. And that would be Survivor. Now, I admit, I was really, really looking forward to this movie. As soon as I found out it was coming out, I was just thrilled. I was so excited.
Anything
What did you think?
Well, honestly, I didn't even hear about this coming out. The first I heard about this film is when you listed it as one that we were going to be watching for this episode.
And this is where Eric admits he did not listen to the entire episode that I did solo, where I talked about this movie coming out. But that's okay.
You mentioned this one?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so I guess I did hear about it at one point, but maybe it just didn't stick.
Backpedaling. Now he backpedals.
Or maybe that was one of the parts that cut out a little bit because that episode was being weird. So
Eric's not as good a listener as all of you.
Evidently,
I appreciate all of you. Thank you again. Can't thank you guys enough. We will stop saying it eventually. I mean, not the thank you part, but the can't thank you enough, because really we know it's been a rough past half year. And we're finally getting consistent again. We're glad of that. We weren't for a while, but you guys have always stuck with us. Our audience numbers have never dropped. And that, I know to me specifically, that means a lot. So,
absolutely.
Once again, thank you.
Completely agree. Once I did hear about it, I was excited because I was like, okay, we've got Pierce Brosnan, obviously awesome, and Mila Jovovich, which I love
me some Mila Jovovich.
I will look at her in just about anything.
And as some people who have heard other of our episodes know, she is, and still is, by the way, even after this, my number one choice for someone who has not yet played one, who I want to see as a Bond villain. Not a hench person, not a Bond girl, but an ass-kicking Bond villain. She is still my number one choice. I would love to see that.
Yeah, I could definitely see that as well.
She could even speak in her original accent if she wants to. For those who don't realize, she was born in the Ukraine. So here we have Mila Jovovich, Pierce Brosnan, and I remember, too, when the movie was filming, because, I follow Mila on Twitter. She was talking about how exciting it was to make this movie and how she really enjoyed working with Pierce Brosnan and had a lot of fun doing this and enjoyed working on the scenes. I'm like, okay, this is going to kick ass. And then watched it this week.
Now, I don't know if you felt the same, but for me, letdown would be doing a disservice to how poor I thought this film was done. I did not particularly enjoy this film. How did you feel about it?
Well, let's compare it to some other films that I have watched outside of a movie theater, so just on home video, over the past month or so. Which would I rather watch? This or the 2005 version of Fantastic Four? This. I would rather watch this. Would I rather watch this or David Hasselhoff starring as Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D.?
Wow, okay. And the verdict?
It's a tough call. I may have to go with the Hoff.
Have you had a chance to find Bridge Across Time / it's billed under either Bridge Across Time or Terror at the London Bridge?
No, not yet. I've had other things I had to watch first, like all these Pierce Brosnan movies.
It's on Amazon Prime. I think you would at least get a kick out of it. Check it out. It's billed as Terror at the London Bridge on Amazon Prime.
Okay.
Some Hoff-tastic action going on there. Let's see. Go ahead.
Yeah, this Survivor was, especially with the expectations I had of it. I mean, I was not expecting fantastic high art. mean, was I expecting it to be as good as Mission Impossible Rogue Nation turned out to be, which I saw in the theater last week, and for those of you who haven't tried it yet, it is fantastic. It is actually my pick for best theatrical release of the summer so far. I really, really enjoyed it, and so I'm glad to see that that franchise has turned around. We may talk about that at some point. But no, I was not expecting it to be that good, but I was expecting it to be better than Expendables 3. I was expecting it to be better than, say, the average Dolph Lundgren movie. And I say this as a Dolph fan, but yeah, I gotta agree with Eric. This was an incredible disappointment. Just huge. It was poorly done on almost every level. And I was thinking, because if you see the trailer for this, you know the plot. This is one of those trailers where it is not ambiguous at all. We're giving away nothing. Where we have Mila Jovovich is an American agent working for the Foreign Service. She specializes in trying to catch terrorists getting visas going through the American embassies. Apparently, according to this story, she had just recently done that successfully, and so she's being called to have a look in on things at the London office. Mm-hmm. So she's sent to the American embassy in London, and of course, there's some corruption going on, there's some terrorism going on, and there's a bombing that kills a bunch of embassy staff, and she gets framed for it. And now she's on the run for a crime she didn't commit, has to clear her name, and the only way she can do that is by catching the real killer before, of course, he can commit a major act of terror. I can't imagine where this might be. It couldn't possibly be New York City because, no, that's not the only place terrorists ever go after, except it is in movies.
He just wants to be a part of it.
Yeah, New York, New York.
Yeah.
And, of course, the person who wants to be a part of it, our bad guy, which is what another thing that really intrigued me about this. Pierce Brosnan is our bad guy, a infamous assassin called the Watchmaker. And he's called the Watchmaker because he uses very precision equipment with basically Watchmaker-level type precision, the tiny gears and everything. And according to the lore of this film, he's had plastic surgery so many times no one knows what he looks like, which is why he kills everybody who sees him. Maybe it's an explanation for Pierce looking pretty rough in this film. And he doesn't necessarily look excited. And yet there's something about this film that did excite him, because in researching the role for when he's got to do one of several shots where you see him at a watchmaker's table looking very precise, he worked with a small watchmaker. And he was so impressed with the gentleman's work that not only did he buy a very expensive watch, but he agreed to become a spokesperson for the company. So take that, Omega.
Oh, dang.
So he got into the part. He got into the role. But watching this movie, it looks like he just wants to get to the bathroom.
It definitely is a rough look for him, and especially considering that it's not that long after November Man. In November Man, he looked older, obviously, because he is, but he didn't look rough. He looked strong.
These films just months apart.
Yeah, and in this one, maybe filming the November Man took it out of him or something, because he was looking very old and very rough in this, and that wasn't the worst of it. He, like you said, it just maybe he had gotten to that point again where he was disillusioned with the type of character he was playing and was just like, yeah, all right, I'll just say my lines and move on with it. Maybe he had read the script. Maybe he had signed on without reading the full script, and after reading the full script, he said, oh, jeez, this is bad. All right, well, let's just...
Or maybe when he hit the set, he was like, okay, there's some things I can deal with here, because it sounds like he and Mila got along very well, personally. And I'm only saying this on the basis of their social media. But in terms of looking at how things turned out for him, kind of wonder if that might have been the only thing he enjoyed on set.
It just really very, very lackluster as far as, okay, now I went into this expecting an action film. I didn't expect anything less, because the first thing I saw was the poster. And you see a poster with the two main actors in the film with guns in their hands, and a small bit of what's obviously looking like a car chase or an explosion or something going. You're seeing like fire and explosion, and you're like, okay, yep, this is an action film. Okay, so no worries. The only thing I ask of this plot is to effectively string the action scenes together without taking me out of the moment. This couldn't do that. Every scene that wasn't an action scene was almost painful to watch, and it's just some of it was cringeworthy. Others was just so ridiculous as to not be even in the slightest bit believable. And this is, coming from the world of Bond fans, where we accept unbelievability to be believable when it fits the story.
Volcano Fort, jetpacks that work just fine, poison-tipped shoe daggers, some of the most awesome things that we think of. Open pit nuclear reactor!
Well, to be fair, we did call that one out. But just not even an open pit nuclear reactor could have saved the plot of this movie. It's just every step of the way forces you to suspend disbelief further and further and further, and it just gets to and especially the main plot, the main plot point of the end. I mean, I don't know. This one is just months old. I don't know if we want to spoil this, but again, it's an action film, so
I would say that disbelief isn't. This movie doesn't just ask you to suspend disbelief. This movie asks you to let disbelief go out bungee jumping. And then it laughs maniacally while it starts sawing away at the bungee cord.
There's just so, it's so rough. It's so rough. The pieces that fall into place, where they fall into place, it just defies all credibility.
And the premise is great. I love the premise.
The very basic premise of...
Yeah, I like the premise of, okay, instead of our heroine being a specific CIA agent or NSA agent, she works for the diplomatic service. Out of the embassy, and not as an undercover agent, but as someone who works in intelligence but out in the open.
Yeah.
I like that. That's good. That's solid. I'm okay with this. I like the idea of what her mission is. I'm good with that. I'm okay with this. And I like the idea of this uber assassin everybody's scared of. Now, that's the only part about this character I like. But once you get past the basic premise, it gets silly because you have same old story, except you've seen it done better 1,000 times, even by Michael Dudikoff and Lorenzo Lamas and people of that caliber. So to say that you've seen movies like that are better than this, that's bad. And the story, like you said, it goes way out of its way to keep piling on the frame job. It's like, we get it. She's being framed. We know. We know she didn't do it. We knew that from the start. You told us already. Even if we'd never seen the trailer, we knew she was innocent. Oh, for Christ's sake, stop it already. Not again.
We get
it. They waste so much time on that.
Yes. Yeah.
And the way everything ties together, like you said, it's just bungee jumping to disbelief.
Yeah, and especially for me, one of the biggest things is I don't mind evil plots that don't make a whole lot of sense. But I require my evil plots to either make sense, at least tenuously, or to be so outrageous as to make their own kind of sense.
Would hypnosis and chickens been too much to ask?
I would have accepted that with open arms, as opposed to what we got. The idea of what these terrorists are planning to do, their specific method of attack, is so ludicrous that it just... But not ludicrous in a cool, unique kind of, oh, that's interesting kind of way. More just no, that's just dumb.
No, it's ludicrous at the bad hair combs type.
Yeah, it's, oh man. You can't help but think, okay, there's about a bazillion ways they could have created that effect better. It's like, okay, so you're going to do this to an entire city. Let's just, I don't want to spoil everything. I hate to say it doesn't really matter with this film. It really doesn't. I'm going to go ahead and say right now that I don't recommend this film. Not even to laugh at, because it's not even
I'm shocked.
Bad enough to be so bad it's good. This is the kind of film that I would expect to find 3 tiers deep in Netflix. Like when you do that search for the movie you want to see, and it tells you, we don't have that, but here's some things you might enjoy. And you click on one of those no-name movies you've never heard of, and then it says, others like this. and you click on one of those no-name movies you never heard of, and then you go to the third level of other movies like this. This is where you get to the really bad stuff. This is where I found Agency of Darkness or Agency of Vengeance Dark Rising. Okay, this is where I found that gold mine, which I still think is a fantastic movie. Everybody should go watch it. It's hilariously bad. It's one of those ones that's bad in a good way. It's so bad, it's great. Watch it. It's awesome. This is the kind of movie I'd expect to find 3 tiers deep. It's not the kind of movie I'd expect to see Pierce Brosnan attached to. And that's what's, I think, more disappointing about it than anything, because they make 100 of these movies a year. You see, these direct-to-video, just generic action films with people who are, either were no names to begin with or well past their prime. I didn't want to think that Pierce Brosnan, going from The November Man to this in just a few months, was that far past his prime. And Mila...
I don't think that of Mila either.
Yeah, exactly.
She's still at it.
Yeah, this is the type of, if it wasn't for them, I would easily accept this as being, what I refer to as a third-tier Netflix film. I don't. It wasn't good.
This, to take your visual a little bit further, here's where I see Survivor come Christmas time. You're going to find it, because right now, of course, being a new release, it's at the lower end of new release pricing. It's about $15. You're going to find it in the $5 bin at Best Buy and at Target. And when you see it there, even on Blu-ray for $5,
don't buy it.
It's going to cost too much money. The only way that I'm going to recommend this movie to anyone, and this is on peril of, you know who you are, you're like me, you hear something's a pile of crap and you have to see it for yourself to believe it. Wait for it to be on your streaming service of choice in the tier that you don't have to pay for. In other words, where you're not paying any extra above your subscription fee. So when this is available on Prime Instant Video, as opposed to the $3 rental it is right now, wait for it to get past rental and go on to Prime Instant Video for free if you're on Amazon Prime. Then watch it. Wait for it to go on the free part of Netflix. Watch it. But if you got to pay rental for this, I love you, Pierce Brosnan. I do. I love you, Mila Jovovich. I do. I can't in good conscience. Okay, I did pay $4 for this movie because I rented it in HD.
Oh, dang. Oops. Oh.
And I did it because of them. Because I love these guys. I usually don't have a problem with Pierce Brosnan. And I love Mila Jovovich. I enjoy all of her stuff. And yes, I know the Resident Evil sequels are not that good, but for the same reason that I enjoy those anyway, I was expecting to enjoy this, because action. Like you said, you expect this to be a bunch of action scenes joined together, and the action scenes in those movies are good. And Mila, in particular, is fantastic in these scenes. I mean, sometimes you can tell there are wires involved, but sometimes they're not. I mean, she can hold her own in these types of scenes, which is why when I watched the fight scenes in this movie, I was like, what the hell happened? Did somebody hamstring her? Was she wearing lead weights?
Totally like, okay, listen, in this movie, you're a desk jockey, so act like that. Yes, it's an action film and you're the star, but don't act like you're in an action movie.
She doesn't have anything even close to resembling a halfway decent fight scene until there's only 16 minutes left. Yes, I watched the counter. I was watching the countdown at that point. And even that's not that good. I mean, basically, between her fight scenes in this movie and George Lazenby's fight scenes in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, I'd rather look at Mila all day long, but I think his fight scenes came out better.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but I agree. It's, just such a disappointment. Like I said, to say letdown is understating it, I think.
And I even actually enjoy Mila's acting. I do. I don't think she's bad. But in this script, I bet the only way you could get this script to work is if you bring in, to replace Mila and Pierce, you bring in Maggie Smith and Ian McKellen and have them read it as a comedy.
All right. I'm on board.
Because you have to get that caliber of actor. And even then, the only way they're salvaging this shit is playing it for laughs.
Yeah, it wasn't good.
It was, and I was so looking forward to this. In fact, the fact that I wanted to watch this movie so bad is what made me think of doing this episode in the first place. It's like, I want to watch a Pierce Brosnan movie, and we've only done Connery, and I think Pierce Brosnan deserves it. And hey, I own November Man, not a much of a stretch. Let's do this.
Yeah. And you know what? To be fair, the other 3 films, 2 of which I give high recommendations to. The other one, hey, give it a shot. You decide. This one, I just cannot put my stamp on. It's not even so bad it's good. It's just bad.
Yeah, it's so bad it's bad. The only way I would suggest anyone watch this is if they're sick on the couch and it happens to hit the free zone of your streaming service of choice. Other than that, sorry, this is not that good.
And that only if you've already watched Agency of Vengeance Dark Rising, because if you have the choice between those two, you know which one I'm voting for.
And yeah, I'll even vote for Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. That's some scary stuff. So overall, I think the way that I'm going to rank these is depending on what mood you're in, because they are sufficiently different movies, either Tailor of Panama or The November Man. It depends if you're looking for something that's just straight up action or something more sink your teeth into it. They're both equally good for what they are. After that, I would go with The Ghostwriter, with the understanding that it is, while not quite an art house film, it's constructed like one. And if you're not willing to jump into it with that mentality, you might get bored real easy, like Eric. And then
sorry,
Survivor, no, it's not even on life support. It's just bad.
Yeah, I would say I tend to agree with the order. I would say, if you're looking for action of these movies, you'd want to go November Man over Tailor of Panama. Pure quality of film, though, I would rank Tailor of Panama above November Man. Not by leaps and bounds, but just a little bit. So if I were putting them in a strict ranking, number 1 would be Tailor, November 2. Dropping down a few rungs to number 3 would be The Ghostwriter. And then way down at the bottom of the ladder in a giant pile of dirt or other smelly things would be Survivor.
Or if you want to look at it by another set of standards, sex, Tailor of Panama, violence, November Man, mood, Ghostwriter, crap, Survivor.
I would rather watch the TV show Survivor than watch this movie again.
I am not going to go that far.
I don't know.
There are some things I will not do for England.
Survivor, the television series.
I might be convinced. I have no idea what she looks like, but, if the Prime Minister of Spain's mistress doesn't look too bad, okay, I'll go for it. I'll do that for England. But, I'm sorry. I will not watch the TV show Survivor. You just can't get me to do it. It's Survivor Man, maybe, but not Survivor.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying that Survivor is a good show. I'm pointing out how bad this Survivor is.
I'm pointing out that while this movie is bad, I don't think it's quite that bad.
It's a coin flip for me, I think. But so there you have it.
I'd still rather watch this than say Rise of the Silver Surfer. Just saying.
I kind of liked the first Fantastic Four.
What, the one Roger Corman made? Oh, that's hilarious.
Not the first one. I meant the first one of the more recent incarnation.
See, to me, that stands on pretty much the same tier as Elektra and Batman and Robin.
Ooh.
It just sucks. I can't stand it. I hate it.
See, now, Elektra I never bothered watching because I didn't even like the Elektra character in Daredevil, which I thought was actually...
It was a bad movie.
It was a bad movie, but I did enjoy it. Not a ton. It's not one that I go back to and watch over and over again. I would tell you I loved Bullseye. Colin Farrell nailed the Bullseye character. He hit that one in the Bullseye for sure. That was
I think that
perfect.
Bullseye was a great character who was wasted on that movie.
Yes, I will say that. I will agree with that. And now that we've seen what Netflix can do with that character, it's like, oh, wow. Okay. That points out how bad that movie was when you see what another group of people can do with that same character and make it so great. If you have Netflix and you haven't watched the Daredevil series yet, you are seriously missing out. You want to go watch that. It's just great.
I have so far not watched any of the comic series. There is one I want to watch, but I have an aversion to watching TV with commercials in it. And I don't have Netflix. I have Amazon Prime. This has not been on Prime. But season 1 is finally coming out on Blu-ray, so I do intend to watch Agent Carter.
Oh, yeah. Agent Carter was good. It was a fun show. I enjoyed it even more, I think, than Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. on TV, only because everything it ties in with has already been on film. Basically, the only thing it really ties in with directly is the first Captain America. Whereas with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., it's keeping current. So if you
But with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the joke's on you, because Joss Whedon and Kevin Feige have both said that they don't occur in the same universe as the movies. It just looks like they do.
So that's how Coulson's still alive. Dang it. I get why they do that, so they don't restrict themselves on either storyline. But it's quite obvious, and what's good about it in one way is that you do have those ties to the films. The bad part about it was, like, when Winter Soldier came out, I hadn't seen it. I didn't see Winter Soldier for a couple of months after it came out, so there was like 5 episodes of that show that made no sense to me because they kept referencing things that happened in Winter Soldier that I hadn't seen yet. So it's like, okay, it's one thing to tie your TV show into the movies, and I appreciate it, but at the same time, maybe do it when you time it so that your movie hits during the season break or something. I don't know.
See, it's really too bad that we have lives, because I think we could get another show out of discussing these things.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And I'm not recommending anyone else on our network to do one because I'd still like to eventually. Just saying.
It would be fun. I think Longbox Guys covers the television comics pretty well, though, so who knows?
I'm thinking movies.
All right. We'll have to do some looking into that. We'll see what we can dig up.
And speaking of movies that are not necessarily James Bond, we hope you have enjoyed our piercing discussion of 4 Pierce Brosnan films, starting with the I'm starting to get fed up with James Bond era and beyond to the present day. And by I'm getting fed up, I mean Pierce Brosnan getting fed up with playing the character, of course. Because we're not fed up with James Bond. Hell no, we've got lots of show to go. Now, for our next show, we will still be straying a little bit away as we talk about midnight movie knockoffs, which are things that take off from the James Bond theme, either movies that have James Bond-style plots or a particular television show that is a flagrant ripoff of James Bond. Think of it as fun for the whole family that's not for the whole family. Midnight Knockoffs. That's going to be our next episode of Her Majesty's Secret Podcast. That will be number 49. And just to give you a little tease, we hope that you look forward to episode number 50 coming after that.
The big
chronologically, it's a bit longer in coming than we had hoped for because of, well, things happening, but we're finally almost there, and we promise you a very, very, very special episode for episode 50, where we cover a topic that I'm sure most of you have been wondering, why the hell haven't we covered it already? So, look forward to that 2 episodes from now at Midnight Knockoffs for our next episode. So, any final thoughts on our very piercing discussion before we go?
No, I think we've pretty much covered it. So, I think, to quote Kate Abbott in Survivor, time's up.
Ah! To quote the audience after watching Survivor.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes. But I'm Ziggy Berkeley.
And I'm Eric Dewey.
And you have been listening to Her Majesty's Secret Podcast, only on the 4-Eyed Radio Network.
This has been another proud production of the 4-Eyed Radio Network. You want to see more shows, go check out www.4eyeradio.com, you winkers.